Greetings, everyone. Greetings, planners. I see some attorneys. I see some zoning enforcement officers. Welcome, friends from the region and friends from afar. We're going to get started at 11:05 to give everyone an opportunity to join the call. So if you have not gotten your coffee or your tea yet, please feel free to do so. We're going to start in about 3 minutes. Welcome, everyone. Again, greetings to those joining us. We're going to start at 11:05. It's nice to see so many practitioners from all aspects of this process in the room. We're going to start in about 2 minutes. If you haven't gotten your coffee yet, please feel free to go do so, or warm up your tea if it's getting a little cold. Alrighty, so we're going to get started in about a minute. Thank you again for everyone who's here joining us. It's nice to see regional planners, municipal planners, zoning enforcement officers. It's nice to see attorneys in the room. I believe that we have a few commissioners. It looks like a great group for a great presentation and conversation we have planned. We see some advocates. Welcome as well. Alrighty. So thank you for joining us today. My name is Savannah Nicole Villalba. I am the Community Planning Director at NVCOG. We want to thank you for being here with us today for this important discussion. And we also want to thank the Department of Housing and the Connecticut chapter of the American Planning Association for partnering with us on this event. So if you are a AICP planner, please make sure that you log your CM credits after this event. I will now pass it off to Desiree Blanchard to give us a brief Zoom etiquette reminder before we get started into the presentation.
Good morning. I'm very excited to have you all join our webinar today. As Aslan said, I just want to go through a few tips and tricks for our Zoom webinar today. So first and foremost, as this is a webinar, all participants are automatically muted to minimize background distractions and noise. So you won't necessarily need to unmute yourselves unless we ask specifically during the Q&A portion of the webinar today. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, please feel free to use the Q&A feature, which is at the bottom of the Zoom screen. You'll see the Q&A section. We'll do our best to address as many questions as possible at the time permitted during the Q&A section. We encourage you to use the chat box for any other comments or technical issues that you may encounter, but please be respectful and stay on topic. Our team at NVCOG will continue to monitor the chat function as the presenter goes through, and then we will also be monitoring the Q&A section and going through those questions. A tidbit for Zooms in general. I know that today it is easy to multitask while we're on Zoom, but we do ask that you try to stay present and focus on the presentation. The content we're sharing today is designed to be valuable, and we really want you to get something out of it. So as much as you can, try to just be present and stay tuned. I do want to note that this is a recorded webinar, so this session will be recorded, and we'll try to send a link to participants after today's session, the conclusion of today's session. And if you have any issues, please do use the comment section to let us know. And I will pitch it back off to Aswan.
Thank you, Desiree. So I am very excited to announce our speaker, Michael Santoro, a man in the housing world who needs no introduction because the breadth of the work that he's had in the state. Michael has had a decades-long career in housing, and I know that at NVCOG, we are honored to have him here with us today. I admire and I look up to Michael a lot, so I'm really excited about this webinar and think that it's going to be a great value added for all of us. So with that, I will pass things off to Michael and we'll get started.
Thank you, SN. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming. Appreciate your interest in the topic. Again, Michael Santoro, I'm the Director of Policy, Research, and Housing Support at the State of Connecticut Department of Housing. The mission of the department is to ensure everyone has access to quality housing opportunities and options throughout the state. The focus for today is Section 830G of the Connecticut General Statutes, or the Affordable Housing Land Use Appeal. The intent is the what, where, when, why, and how of 830G, but also, and more importantly, what it's not, where it's not, when it's not, why it's not, and how the municipality can use it. Okay, very quick. I'm going to hopefully get the dry stuff out of the way quickly. It's found in Chapter 126A of the Connecticut General Statutes, specifically Section 8-30G. It is, believe it or not, a result of a Blue Ribbon Commission on affordable housing that took place back in fiscal 87-88. It was originally established under Public Act 89-311 and first took effect July 1 of 1990. Okay, it has been in place for 33 years. It is modeled after a similar program in the state of Massachusetts, but it was supposed to originally been part of a multifaceted approach, or a three-legged stool. And the concept at that time was there was cooperation, offer a carrot, as well as provide a stick. In addition to the Affordable Housing Land Use Appeals Act, there was the Regional Fair Housing Compact and the Connecticut Housing Partnership Program. Regional Fair Housing Compact was the cooperation, the carrot was the Connecticut Housing Partnership Program, and the Affordable Housing Land Use Appeals Act was intended to be the stick. This particular stick has been modified, as you can see, many, many, many times over the last 34 years, as much as recently as 2023. What is our department's role under 830G? We have an obligation to promulgate regulations associated with the Appeals Act and some of its provisions, those that are non-judicial in nature. We do not have true regulatory or compliance authority associated with 830G. We provide guidance and technical assistance. My office in particular is happy to provide that guidance to municipalities, to developers, to town planners, to planning and zoning commissions, and to private citizens. Basically, if you want to know about 830G, call and ask. We are happy to talk to you about it. We provide sample calculations for sale, resale, rental. We can even give you sample documents, sample deed restrictions along the way. In addition, the department is obligated to collect and report on the inventory of affordable housing, and we'll talk about that in a little more detail. Basically, we are responsible for determining the applicability of the statute, i.e., the 10% exempt list. So, what was the original intent, and what does it really do? So, it was intended to prevent arbitrary and capricious decisions by local boards and commissions, planning, zoning, wetlands, etc. When it first came about, the big issue at the time was not in my backyard, or NIMBY. It was intended to be the stick associated with the prevention or the inhibition of NIMBY. What does it really do? It simply provides the right to bring an appeal of any local decision, board or commission, to the Superior Court. And the burden of proof shifts from the plaintiff, or in this case, the developer, to the defendant, the municipality, specifically whatever board or commission is making that decision. In addition, it limits the defense by that municipality to health and safety or other matters that that board or commission may legally consider. You have to document that public interests outweigh the need for affordable housing, and that those public interests cannot be otherwise protected by reasonable revision to that proposed development. Okay. Secondarily, proposed project cannot be constructed in an industrial zone that does not already permit residential, and the proposed project is not assisted housing. And assisted housing is housing that is financed as 100% affordable by our department. Okay, what isn't it, really? It isn't a mandate to make 10% of all your housing stock affordable. It is not a right to ignore all local requirements, and it is not a right to build anything anywhere. A lot of people don't seem to understand, and very many local planning and zoning boards simply, I'll say it, bend over when a project is proposed. That is not the most appropriate action. You want to work with your developers. Okay, when can't it be used? It's only when substantial public interests in health or safety clearly outweigh the need for affordable housing. A couple of examples of reasons you can and cannot deny a project relative to 830G. Invalid denial. Well, it's just too dense. We're trying to preserve the neighborhood character. It has a negative fiscal or school impact. It violates existing zoning regulations or the current plan of conservation and development. It causes traffic congestion as opposed to is a safety concern, which would be valid. And it just doesn't look nice, or it's aesthetics. Those are not good reasons for any local board or commission to deny a project proposed under 830G. However, there are some really good reasons to deny a project that is being brought forth trying to use 830G. There's a valid fire safety issue with the project as it is proposed. There's inadequate sewage disposal available in the community. There's an inadequate water supply. There is an inadequate traffic study, i.e., it will, in fact, cause a traffic safety issue. And if it is impinging on open space, if it is a long-time municipal priority. So, we talked a little bit about what is a set-aside development. Well, a set-aside development is that project which is proposed consistent with 830G. Okay. It has to meet a specific statutory definition to qualify as a set-aside development. So not just any project proposed by a developer qualifies as 830G. We're going to talk about some of those requirements as well, but the general definition is that not less than 30% of the total units in the development, whether ownership or rental, are deed restricted for a minimum of 40 years. In addition, of the affordable units, half or 15% of the total project must serve persons or families at or below 60% of the state median income or the area median income, whichever is lower. This is really not an issue in most of the state of Connecticut, except in Fairfield County, where the state median income is generally lower and in some cases significantly lower than the published area median income. When we say published, these are numbers that are published annually by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development using data from the American Community Survey through the U.S. Census. Finally, the remaining affordable units in the 30% of the total project have to serve persons or families at the lesser of state or area median income at the 80% limit. The reason this is written this way is for rounding purposes, okay? Not less than 15% have to serve at the 60 percentile. The remainder, or the fraction, applies to the 60% category. So when you talk about projects, you talk about whole numbers of units. You're going to round up to serve the 60% units first. That's not clear, please ask. We'll give you a better description later. Okay. Developer comes in your community. How does he actually propose a set-aside development? Well, in order to use the appeal under the Affordable Housing Land Use Appeal, an affordable housing application must include an affordability plan. And there are minimum requirements for an affordability plan. Before I get into what the minimum requirements are, I want to make it clear. These are the minimum requirements. If your community is progressive, wants to address its affordable housing needs, and wants to craft policies to promote affordable housing development, you can add additional requirements to what must be included in an affordability plan. You have to create those, you have to publish them, you have to adopt them formally as your municipal policy. But it is entirely possible, and we highly recommend that communities look at what the components of a valid affordability plan include, and that you, the community, set parameters around minimum requirements, for example, for experience of the developer, of the property manager, of the individual, what we call affordability administrator, who is ultimately responsible to ensure compliance at the local level. And again, before I continue with the slide, compliance, once the project is built, is inherently the original developer's problem as overseen by the municipality. We, the state of Connecticut, do not look at compliance at the local level. We will help you. We will provide guidance. We'll give you sample documentation. We'll even talk to you about best practices. But ultimately, compliance or insurance of compliance by the developer is on the municipality. Okay. What are the minimum requirements for an affordability plan? Well, the plan must identify, designate, call out the person, entity, or agency responsible for the administration of the affordability for the duration of that 40+ year period. That applies whether it's rental or ownership. And again, as I said a moment ago, we highly recommend the municipality look at this and develop minimum criteria for experience associated with that responsible entity. You don't have to, but you can. And in the long run, it will help you. The developer must include an affirmative fair housing marketing plan. If you don't know what an affirmative fair housing marketing plan, basically, it is a federal and state document that documents what marketing techniques you, the developer, and its affordability administrator will use to solicit fair applications. affirmatively fair applications. Applications from individuals who may not otherwise apply to live in those units. There's a standard form and a standard format. We're happy to share that with anyone who asks, whether it's the town planner, developer, whoever. The developer must include a sample calculation, whether it's sales or rental. Again, we can provide you with a sample on the methodology that is in the statute and the regulation is required to be used to calculate the maximum cost, whether it's rental or for sale. The developer must provide a description of the construction sequence, as well as the location of the affordable units within the development. What we don't want is all the affordable units to get built first or last, and we don't want them all clustered in one location on the site. They must be distributed throughout the project or throughout the development, and that is both in terms of location and when they are built. Finally, the developer must provide draft regulations or modifications, conditions of approval, copies of the deed, the proposed deeds or restrictive covenants, and if applicable, lease provisions that will be governing the affordable units for that entire 40-year term. We have samples. If you, the municipality or the developer, want to see what we recommend, we are happy to provide it. Okay. So what is and isn't the 10% affordable exempt list really? Well, first of all, it is a threshold for applicability of the appeal. It is a category or a set of categories of housing that we, the Department of Housing, can document and count. What isn't it, or what shouldn't it be? It shouldn't be a goal or a target. It is definitely not a mandate, and it is not an estimate of need. Many communities talk about, well, you know, the state says I got to do 10%. No, we don't. What we say is, in order for anyone to be able to use the appeal available, you can only do it in a community that has less than 10%. It is literally a threshold for applicability. That is all. Some communities need significantly more than 10% of their housing stock as affordable. Some communities don't. Many communities, I would argue, don't and shouldn't be trying to get to 10%. They don't need to. And there's that word, the most important thing. A community needs to identify its affordable housing need. Many of you, most of you, went through this effort in the creation of your municipal affordable housing plan. That plan was intended to get you to look at your community's needs and to identify ways that you can begin to address those needs. 10% has nothing to do with that need. Okay. So when we talk about the 10% list in affordable housing, we're talking about a specific definition of affordable housing. And I'll say it this way. I was there. So this was literally created back in the fiscal 87, 88 Blue Ribbon Commission, followed up in 89 before it took implementation July 1 of 1990. We were asked as a department, what can we count? How can we count it so that we can create a threshold? It was at that time recognized not as a vehicle or a notation of need, but literally, what's the threshold for eligibility? We came up with this. We told the legislature what we could count. Well, we can count our governmentally assisted housing, and I'll break that down a little bit more in a minute. We can count housing which is restricted by deed or restrictive covenant. We can count tenant-based rental assistance, whether that's state or federal. And we can count single-family mortgages that are assisted in some way, either through Connecticut Housing Finance Authority or through the USDA. Okay. And we do. We count those on an annual basis. So let's break them down real quick. What is governmentally assisted housing? It's any housing that is receiving or will receive financial assistance under any governmental program for the construction or substantial rehab of low and moderate income housing. That is important. It is a governmental program that does either new construction or substantial rehab. It is not moderate or minor rehab. It's not token assistance. Okay. It is specific to the creation of or the substantial rehabilitation of housing. And it's targeted at low and moderate income housing, which is a special category of income. Finally, any housing occupied by persons receiving rental assistance under either Chapter 319 UU, that's the state's rental assistance payments program, or Section 1437F of Title 42 of the U.S. Code, which most people know as the Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher Program. Okay. Specific examples of the programs: multifamily housing financed by my department, the Department of Housing; multifamily financed by CHFA, HUD, or USDA; state rental assistance, or federal Section 8. Next category, deed restricted housing. It's any housing that is subject to a binding recorded deed containing covenants or restrictions that require such dwelling units to be sold or rented at or below prices which will preserve the units as housing, for which persons and families pay 30% or less of their income, where such income is less than or equal to 80% of the median income, where median income is defined as the lesser of the state or area. It also includes, due to recent changes in the legislation, certain kinds of mobile manufactured housing, specifically units that are legally approved accessory apartments, or ADUs. But again, for a minimum affordability period, and we will count them for that minimum affordability period, in this case, of 10 years. Now, you'll know, when we talked about a set-aside development, the requirement is 40. We talk about counting towards the threshold of eligibility for these types of units. If it has at least a 10-year restriction, we will count them for that 10-year period. Finally, for the purposes of this statute alone, there's a specific definition as to what qualifies as an accessory apartment. You need to look at Section 830G subsection K for details on what qualifies. That has changed since the law first passed. And if you're trying as a municipality to count the ADUs that would qualify towards the 10%, I strongly encourage you to take a detailed look at 830G subsection K. And if you have questions, please reach out. My contact information is available at the end for any follow-up. Next category, we count our tenant-based rental assistance. We talked about it very quickly. Basically, there's two programs, one state-funded, one federal. It's the federal Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher Program. Anybody who's familiar with the Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher Program knows that there are probably a dozen sub-programs under Section 8. We count them all. In addition, the state's rental assistance payments program, which has most of the same sub-programs under it, state financed versus federally financed. We are one of, I want to say, a couple of dozen states that provide a state financed rental assistance program across the country. The majority do not. Really obvious and easy one: CHFA or USDA single family mortgages, what a lot of people refer to as FHA insured mortgages. It is any low interest first mortgage provided by CHFA, and that can include FHA insurance, down payment assistance, or the more recent initiative by the state in conjunction with CHFA, time to own. If you haven't heard of time to own, Take a look at the Connecticut Housing Finance Authority website for information. It has resulted in over 4,800 new first-time home buyers in the last 2 years. Finally, any low interest, again, first mortgage provided by the USDA. For these two categories, this is information we get directly from USDA or CHFA on an annual basis. So that's 830G in a nutshell. Okay. What it is, what it isn't, how it applies, and hopefully a little bit about how you, a community, can use it to drive affordable housing, what you want, where you want, the way that you want it. Okay. All that being said, there are a lot of communities who want to know, well, I heard about this moratorium. I heard I can get a reprieve from 830G and its applicability. The answer is yes, you can, under the statute and in accordance with the regulations. The formal terminology is you get a certificate of affordable housing completion, which more commonly referred to in simpler languages, a moratorium. You get a 4-year break from the eligibility to use the appeal available under 830G. Okay, well, in order for a community to qualify for a certificate of affordable housing completion, you have to have produced a certain amount of affordable housing. Different definition than what we talked about earlier relative to what we count towards the 10%. Let me be clear. Not everything that counts under the 10% counts towards a certificate of affordable housing completion. In addition, it's not unit for unit. It's not one for one. The threshold for a certificate of affordable housing completion is measured in what are called housing unit equivalent points. Okay. Housing unit equivalent points are based on the depth of affordability and the type of affordable housing that you have successfully completed in your community. Let me be clear. We talk about that. Communities get different housing unit equivalent points for different kinds of housing. The points you get for rental are different than the points you get for ownership. The points you get for family units are different than the points you get for elderly. Deep income targeted units, that serve 0 to 30, 50, 60% of AMI or below, get you more points than units that serve 80%. Finally, mobile manufactured units, newly restricted mobile manufactured units can get you housing unit equivalent points, but at a different point scale than some of the other units. So how do you qualify? Well, you must identify, document the equivalent of at least 2% of your municipal's housing stock according to the latest U.S. Census, but not less than 75 housing unit equivalent points. So if you have a very small community, 2% of your housing stock could get you a housing unit equivalent number less than 75. By statute, you must at least have produced 75 housing unit equivalent points. The larger your community, the larger that number is, i.e. it's 2% of your published U.S. Census housing stock number. Okay? What does count towards a certificate of affordable housing completion? A community is allowed to count the following: units that have been developed or created since the implementation of the law, 7/1/90. Okay? If it existed on or before 7/1/1990, it does not get you points. Okay? But what can get you points? Anything that's newly deed restricted at or below 80% of the area median income. Any units that are governmentally assisted and are occupied. Any units located within an approved, state-approved, IHZ or incentive housing zone, which is found under 8-13M. And if you don't know what an IHZ is, happy to talk to you at a later date about how a community can implement an incentive housing zone. Finally, units that are located in a resident-owned mobile manufactured home park. It's a specific definition and a specific kind of mobile manufactured housing. Okay. What does it get you? Well, it basically gets you for your rest, relaxation, reprieve from the applicability of the appeal. That is, during a 4-year moratorium, a developer cannot propose to build a set-aside development using 830G. He does not have access to the appeal. Does that mean nobody can build affordable housing? Absolutely not. As a matter of fact, the goal is for you, the municipality, to promote the construction of affordable housing that you want, that meets your needs in locations you have identified within your community during that period. In theory, if a community is proactive, you can get a moratorium during which period you can build the units that you want, that you promote. And by the end of that 4-year period, have enough units to qualify for another 4-year break. And so on and so on. If that is your community's goal. But I would say to you, if you are a community that is interested in building affordable housing, that you have a solid municipal affordable housing plan that identifies what your need is, that you put incentives in place to promote the development of units that will address your need, the development community will build it, and they will build it in cooperation with you. It is only when communities are adversarial that developers become adversarial as well. A lot of people sometimes talk about a friendly 830G project. What is generally meant by that is there's a project of affordable housing that meets the definition of a set-aside development that is supported by the town. The developer comes in, town and municipality get together, figure out where they want, what they want, and take steps to get it built. Why does this exist? Well, the intent was to give communities the opportunity to promote development of affordable housing consistent with its own plan, i.e., tell the developer what you want, where you want it, and who you want it to serve. Very often, development community will help you build it. So, sometimes people ask, well, what is the department's position on projects or developers that bring an 830G project? Okay. Specifically, does DOH make any funding decisions associated with or hinge on the applicability relative to the Affordable Housing Land Use Appeals Act? The answer is no. Can a developer use DOH pre-development funds to pay for an appeal under 830G? The answer is no. Finally, does the department blindly support any proposed project that is eligible or meets the definition of a set-aside development? The answer is no. Okay. Our funding decisions, who we work with, how we work, are based solely on the financial viability of the project. And if we can work positively with the community and a developer to get a project built, it is those projects that we make a concerted effort to fund or assist. Now, I covered a whole lot of very basic information in 35 minutes or so. I literally have talked about this 4 days and can. If you have specific questions associated with the Affordable Housing Land Use Appeals Act, whether it's what counts towards 10%, how do I get information, how can I propose a project, how as a municipality can I set up a compliance system, how can I ensure that what is being proposed is affordable? What are affordability numbers? Anything associated with 830G, we are happy to provide guidance. assistance, documentation, samples. We are here to help you, whether you are a private citizen, a developer, a municipal planner, members of local planning and zoning, members of your local affordable housing commission, if you have one. If you want help, we are here to help you. We can and we will, and we have done so across the state. I talk 830G at least once every day. Some days it is, 6 hours or more. So I see there's a couple of questions. I'm going to take the slide down in a second after everybody has a chance. This is my direct contact information. That is my desk phone. It rings and rolls over to my state cell phone. So the fact that we are continue to do hybrid and telework means you can still get a hold of me, and people who know me will tell you I answer my phone. My email, first name dot last name at ct.gov. In case you didn't know, most state employees, that is their email. First name dot last name at ct.gov. That is mine. And if you want samples, reach out. Finally, there is information available on our programs, activities, and everything Department of Housing at tt.gov/DOH. Okay, I'm going to take my slide down, stop sharing. I'm happy to answer questions if there are any. So, Savannah, back to you.
Thank you, Michael. And I want to echo what he's saying. I spend a lot of time bugging the Department of Housing about 830G and other housing related things, and Michael and his staff are really responsive and really helpful. So please do take his offer. They're such a great resource for all of us. So Desiree and I will go back and forth on the questions, but the first question you have today, Michael, is does 830G apply to projects which contain commercial uses?
It's funny, that's a really interesting one because we've had this a couple of times, particularly over the last, I want to say 4 or 5 years. And to my knowledge, there is currently no case law where a project which is commercial and residential has been brought to Superior Court for consideration. Okay. So the answer is we don't know. Is it possible for a developer to propose commercial with residential and bring an appeal? It is possible for them to bring an appeal. Will they be successful? Again, we don't know because nobody's done it.
Okay, so the next question, and I do want to acknowledge that we do see a hand raised in the participants, and we'll get to you. We just want to go through those in the Q&As first. So next question, what is the source for the quote, when can't it be used, unquote list? Is that directly from the statute, or is that the Department of Housing's interpretation?
That is not from the statute, and that is not from our interpretation. That has been the appeals court's determination. We've seen this in case law. Those are the decisions. Those are the reasons, I should say, that have been given as part of those decisions for success or lack thereof.
The last question we have thus far in the chat is from Jay. It says, often when an 830G project is appealed, when the revised project returns from court to the commission for reconsideration, all 60% deed restricted units are gone and all units are deed restricted at 80% of the AMI. Why is it that these 60% units are not required to remain part of the affordability mix if the goal is to provide more accessible housing for more folks?
I wish I could answer that. You'd have to ask the judge, to be perfectly frank. Yeah. That's a very astute observation, and we have seen the same thing. But with anybody who's ever had to go to court and reach a settlement, it is just that. It's not what was proposed. It's not what the law requires. It's whatever the two parties can agree to. And very often, from the developer's standpoint, they let the 60% units go because those are the ones that actually cost them money. And from the municipality's standpoint, they let those go because those are the hardest ones to serve. Would we prefer to see the 60% units remain? Absolutely. But again, once it goes in front of a judge, all bets are off and all negotiations are open, fair, and available. Hope that helps.
Okay, and then we have a hand raised, so I'm going to allow this participant, Christine O'Neill. You should be able to speak now.
I'm sorry if I had my hand raised. I did not realize I did. I have no questions. I'm just enjoying the presentation. Very sorry about that.
No worries.
Right. Any other questions from members of the audience? I'll do a quick down now. Seeing no questions, we'll give you one more minute if you're typing, but otherwise we'll let everyone out with time to spare, so you can, if you didn't get coffee on the front end, you can get coffee at the end. But with that, I want to thank you again, Michael, for doing this with us. This is such a great, insightful presentation. As someone who has gone through the 830G appeals process as a planner, having this information before an application is really helpful so that we can guide our decision makers through these processes. So just to know that you are here and the department is here really helps create informed decision making on the local level, and that's the goal for all of us. And so we want to. Oh, I see a question from Chris Smith. So I'll share my thank you, but we'll ask this last question and we'll end
Sure.
with Chris's question. Can a developer prioritize affordable units to town employees, elderly, veterans, etc., and still qualify as affordable under Section 8-30G?
So really what you're talking about are tenant selection. Can you give a preference to certain population groups? And the short answer is there is a way to do it without violating federal and state fair housing laws. The easiest way to say it is if your target population provides an equal preference to those least likely to apply in your community, you can in fact provide a preference. It's not a set aside. It's not, you can't limit who you serve. You can provide a preference to those population groups. We have a developer, as a matter of fact, down in Greenwich, who's trying to do that right now. They're trying to prioritize one of those population groups. And the short answer is they can say, I want to give a priority or a preference to, in this case, municipal employees. Well, they have to give an equal preference to those populations who are least likely to apply in that community. They must do an analysis to identify least likely to apply. And when they take applications, they must give the equal weight to municipal employees and those least likely to apply. As long as they give an equal preference, serve both of those population groups equally, fairly, and equitably, then they're okay under fair housing. We can give more. If somebody's got a specific question and wants to walk through an example, reach out to me. Happy to talk you through how you can make that work. Okay.
I always get good information when I get to chat with you, Michael. Oh, we have another one. They're trickling. Desiree, you want to take that?
Yeah, okay. So yeah, we have one more hand raised and I'll allow you to speak. You should be able to ask your question.
Hi, Mike.
Hi, Margarita. How are you?
I'm good. Just when I hear you say it again, so it didn't actually come into us, but somebody wanted to build a building that was all market, and 1.5 miles away, they wanted to do affordable units that would meet the set aside percentage that one would have in that building. Your take, and it went away, but your take would be that that doesn't meet the law, right?
So if the question is, would that activity qualify as a set aside development?
There you
Our
go.
position would be no. Now, I'll be perfectly frank. A project like that, to my knowledge, has not been brought to Superior Court. Could a developer propose to do 50 units over here market rate, 30 units over there, affordable, and try to bring an appeal. They can try. I don't believe they would be successful because that would in fact defeat the purpose of 830G to begin with. The idea is to integrate our housing. We want mixed income developments where some of the units in the project are affordable and some of the units in the project are market rate, because that is in fact building communities. So I can't definitively say the answer is no, but my gut says the answer would be no.
Thank you, sir.
Anytime.
Mike in the chat. Does the area median income and state median income numbers use the same calculation formula?
Yes.
This attendee says they've seen federally funded projects sometimes use a varied calculation using the area median income question mark.
So we use by statute the HUD published numbers. They're published annually. HUD publishes both a list of state median incomes as well as area median incomes. Okay. There are other area median income numbers that are published by other entities. For example, a lot of people use those numbers published by Naugatuck, who's a very prominent private organization affiliated with the federal low-income housing tax credit program. There are other private organizations that publish their own area median income numbers based on other criteria. Relative to the Appeals Act, by statute, we use the HUD published numbers. Those are available at huduser.org or by reaching out to the department. They get updated annually, and we are very consistent in the use of those numbers across all of our programs.
Okay, I see no more. I will give everyone one more minute because it appears last time I almost cut us off too early, but I'm seeing lots of thank yous. People found it helpful. Presentation was clear, concise, and informative. People thought this was a great program for the morning. People are looking forward to seeing the slides, which again, we will upload this presentation to the website that we provided in the answered comments, but we'll also send an invitation for review through email for attendees today. I'm sorry, Michael. I'm going to do this last one, and then I'm really done. Oh, no, there's two. Okay.
It's
we'll
okay.
Keep those, and then I'm sorry we're keeping you till 12, but
it's okay.
Jay's asking, what is the likelihood of the Build for Connecticut Workforce Housing Program continuing to be funded?
Well, we've got Build for CT not on today's bond commission agenda, but we'll be looking for more money at the very next state bond commission. Those who don't know, today the state bond commission met. We had, as an agency, I think somewhere in the neighborhood of $125+ million on today's bond commission agenda. We did not include Build for CT because we don't need it right now. But we have and anticipate, I think it's another $50 million for the remainder of this calendar year in the Build for CT program. We'll see when the governor's budget comes out in January, whether there's additional money for Build for CT. We certainly would be supportive if the governor's office is interested in continuing to promote Build for CT.
Awesome. And then we'll close out with Robert's question. If an existing market rate apartment community is expanded, do the existing units count in calculating the number of affordable units needed?
If an existing market rate apartment is expanded, so you have an existing project and you're going to add units on, okay? You're only talking about the add-on units in terms of development. Are you asking, well, the site by local zoning says I can only build 50 units, and there's 50 units now, but I want to add on. I'm going to increase the density, and I want to increase the density by adding a set-aside development onto the property. I believe the way it would be looked at is the 50 units would have to be included in the calculation of the number of affordable units you are proposing. So if you're going to have 50 and you wanted to add 30 units, then 30% of the total 80 units would have to be affordable, or 24 units would have to be affordable to qualify as a set-aside development. You can't sneak around the law to try to add just a small piece. I hope that answers your question.
Michael, more questions still are trickling in. I'm going to
It's
stop
okay.
saying we're ending before 12. I will keep us here. Someone asked.
And before you go, remember, everybody, you have my contact information. Feel free to email me. I will be happy to answer your questions directly as well. Go ahead.
Perfect. So how does Build for Connecticut Workforce incorporate into the 830G unit?
Oh, those units that are funded using Build for CT are actually being funded under the state's Housing Trust Fund program, or what we call HTF. Those units that are affordable in that project are counted towards the 10% exempt list. Now, can a community also earn housing unit equivalent points on those units? And that will depend on the actual affordability provided in those units. And if you want to get into the nitty-gritty of housing unit equivalent points and how many points they may or may not qualify for, reach out to me directly, because it gets very technical and very specific in terms of how to qualify for housing unit equivalent points.
Perfect. And then we have, when is the next bond commission meeting? December?
It was today.
The one
after this,
Yeah.
it is there's speculation that there'll be one in December. Okay. We usually, and I've been doing this a long time, and I would say most years there is a December meeting early in December to close out the year. In particular to deal with the tax exempt bond cap and any leftover cap room. But it's generally not an extensive agenda in December. Immediately, however, into the new year, January, there's usually a bond commission action as well.
Perfect. All right. Now I truly see no more. So please take Michael up on reaching out. He has a wonderful team there. Ben and Laura and Connor are really great assets that work with Michael. So we're thankful again for the department for partnering with us and Michael for sharing his expertise. We're thankful to the Connecticut chapter of the American Planning Association for being willing to partner to offer CM credit. Again, if you are an AICP certified planner, please be sure you log your CM credit for this event. Otherwise, we hope that you have a wonderful day, and please check in on the NVCOG website for the YouTube link to this event once we post it. Have a great day, everyone.